started his career, I introduced them on their very first television show.
There's a secret Diana Ross has kept for over half a century. A connection with Michael Jackson so strange, so layered, that even his closest friends only whispered about it. He once called her mother, sister, and something more he left unsaid. That single ambiguity shaped both of their lives for decades. They once shared an apartment during filming. He skipped her wedding, and in his final will, her name appeared right after his own mother. Silent actions. Quiet, but earth-shaking. No one dared name it, until Diana, at 81, finally broke the silence. This is not a love story. This is the deepest secret Michael Jackson ever carried. And tonight, piece by piece, it unravels. The first encounter. It all began in Detroit, a smoky Motown event. The room buzzing with executives, stars, and voices that would define an era. In the middle of it all, a boy, tiny, nervous, just 9 years old. Michael Jackson. His sequined jacket too big for his small frame, his hands trembling as he clutched the edge of his brother's sleeve. He wasn't the king of pop yet. He wasn't even Michael Jackson yet. He was just a child, shoved into the spotlight, surrounded by adults who judged every move, eyes wide, unsure if he belonged. And then, she appeared. Diana Ross. Already the queen of Motown, already untouchable. A woman who commanded every camera flash, every whisper in the room. She could have ignored him. She could have brushed past like everyone else. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned down, lowered herself to his level, and with a warmth that pierced right through the noise, she called him sweetheart. For Michael, that single word was a lifeline. It wasn't just kindness. It was recognition, validation. Everyone else saw a nervous boy from Gary, Indiana. But Diana? She saw him. Not a product, not a paycheck, a person. And in that instant, Michael attached himself to her. Not with words. He was too shy for that. But with something far deeper. The look in his eyes said it all. This is the one person who understands me. From that moment forward, Diana Ross wasn't just a star to him. She was the first light in a world that often felt dark. The first person who made him feel safe in the very place he feared most. The spotlight. And Michael never forgot it. Decades later, when asked to define their bond, he could only say 3 haunting words: mother, sister, lover. Mentor, idol, and more. By 1971, Diana Ross wasn't just famous. She was Motown, the face, the voice, the unstoppable force, and right beside her, a teenage Michael Jackson, still finding his footing, still carrying the awkwardness of a child star who'd grown up too fast. When her television special Diana aired, America saw him beam under the lights. But what the cameras didn't catch was the teacher standing in the wings. Diana wasn't drilling him like a coach. She wasn't barking instructions. She was showing him, softly, patiently, how to survive under the spotlight. Smile here. Hold the note a second longer. Don't fight the camera. Let it come to you. And Michael listened. Every word, every gesture. He didn't just mimic her moves. He absorbed her essence. Look at her stage presence from that era. Head high, shoulders back. A gaze that said, I belong here. Then look at Michael. The tilt of his head, the way he extended his hand to the audience, the confidence in his still shy smile. Pieces of Diana, woven into him. She was more than a mentor. She was the blueprint, the performer he wanted to be, and the woman he quietly adored. To the world, their relationship was glamorous, the young prodigy and the reigning diva. But to Michael, it was something more intimate, something harder to define. He once summed it up with a phrase that still unsettles people to this day. Mother, sister, lover, all in one. Strange words? Yes. But for Michael, they made perfect sense. She protected him like a mother, guided him like an older sister, and yet, deep in his heart, she stirred something he couldn't name. It wasn't puppy love. It wasn't idol worship. It was a bond that blurred every boundary, and while the rest of the world saw Michael Jackson becoming a star, Michael himself knew the truth. He was becoming her student, her shadow, her mirror. And little by little, Diana Ross wasn't just shaping a career. She was shaping Michael Jackson himself. The Wiz, their private world. New project, a gamble for both. The Wiz, a bold all-black remake of The Wizard of Oz. Diana Ross cast as Dorothy, Michael Jackson as the Scarecrow. On paper, just another musical. But in reality, this film gave Michael something he had never had before. Time with Diana. Not minutes backstage, not quick rehearsals, but every single day. For the first time, he wasn't just looking up to her on stage, he was sharing breakfasts, running lines, laughing between takes, living in her orbit. And here's what made people whisper. Michael didn't book a fancy hotel suite. He rented a small apartment in New York during filming. And one night, Diana stayed there. No entourage, no managers, just the two of them. Did anything happen? No one knows. Michael never spoke of it. Diana never explained it. But the crew noticed. They whispered. And the silence that followed was louder than any confirmation could have been. The film itself flopped. Critics tore it apart. But Michael, he didn't care. Because away from the cameras, he was finally experiencing something rare. Something he'd been chasing since he was 9 years old. Being close to Diana without barriers. Watch their duet. Ease on down the road. Listen closely. They weren't just acting, they weren't just singing. There's a connection in every note. Raw, unguarded, electric. On stage, Michael was the Scarecrow searching for brains. But off stage, he was still that boy searching for her approval, her warmth, her presence. And for Diana, she let him be vulnerable. She didn't push, she didn't correct. She simply allowed him to exist. Imperfect, shy, human. The world judged The Wiz as a failure. But for Michael, it was the opposite. It was his private victory. Because inside that New York apartment, in those quiet dinners, in those stolen hours, he wasn't the king of pop. He wasn't the child prodigy. He wasn't Michael Jackson. He was just a young man, finally breathing in the presence of the woman who had always been everything. Michael's public confession, Michael Jackson is 23 years old, already a global star, but not yet the king of pop. Thriller is still months away. The stage this time? Not a concert, not a screaming arena, but a quiet room, an interview for Ebony magazine. Reporters expected the usual, polite answers, shy smiles, nothing controversial. But that day, something cracked. Between questions about music and fame, the reporter asked about love, and Michael hesitated. For a moment, you could almost hear his heartbeat louder than the cameras. Then, he spoke. Clear, direct. Not hiding behind jokes or metaphors, he said. It's Diana Ross. I love her. If I could, I'd marry her. The room froze. The reporter blinked, unsure if he was serious. The staff chuckled nervously, waiting for a punchline. But Michael didn't laugh. He didn't take it back. He just looked down, smiled softly, like he'd finally released a secret he'd been holding since childhood. And that's the thing about Michael Jackson. He was a master of mystery. He hid behind masks, costumes, makeup, stage lights. But in that moment, there was no mask. Just a young man admitting, maybe for the first and only time, who he truly loved. The public didn't know what to do with it. Some brushed it off as a crush, others thought it was tabloid bait. But if you study his eyes in that interview, You see it. He wasn't playing. He wasn't promoting. He was confessing. And here's what makes it even more powerful. This wasn't the 2020s, where age gap relationships and celebrity confessions flood the internet daily. This was the early 80s. A black man, barely in his 20s, openly declaring his love for a world-famous diva nearly 2 decades older than him. It was bold. It was scandalous. It was the bravest thing he had ever said on record. He knew the world might not believe him. He knew people would laugh, dismiss, or deny. But Michael didn't care. He just needed it to be spoken, and that single sentence, "It's Diana Ross. I love her," became the most haunting truth of his private life. Not sung, not danced, not performed, but confessed. The wedding that broke him. Mid-1980s, the world is celebrating. Diana Ross, Motown royalty, global icon, America's diva, is getting married. Her groom, Arne Nies Jr., a Norwegian businessman. The headlines glow with photos of the happy couple. Guests arrive dressed in elegance. Flashbulbs pop. The press writes about a fairy tale union. But somewhere else, alone, Michael Jackson is staring at an invitation, a simple white card. Her name, his name, together, not as dream and dreamer, but as bride and groom. And he can't go. He won't go. This is the woman he had already confessed to loving. The woman he once told America he would marry if he could. And now she belonged to someone else. Friends who were with him said he didn't even try to fake a smile. No polite congratulations. No, I'm happy for her. Just silence. When someone dared to ask why he wasn't attending, Michael's answer was simple. I loved her, and I always will. Think about that. The king of pop, adored by millions, wanted by millions, reduced to a quiet young man mourning the love he could never claim. In public, he was dazzling, but behind closed doors, he was devastated. Empty days in the studio, curtain rooms. No music, no laughter, just silence. This wasn't anger, not jealousy, it was grief. The kind that doesn't explode, it lingers. Quiet, heavy, relentless. He wasn't losing a mentor. He wasn't losing a friend. He was losing the one person he had ever said out loud that he loved. And yet, Michael didn't lash out. He didn't gossip. He didn't try to make her feel guilty. Instead, he disappeared for a while. Withdrew from the world. The boy who once beamed beside her on stage was now a man learning what it meant to love and lose without ever truly having. To the tabloids, Diana's wedding was a glamorous headline. To Michael, it was heartbreak dressed in white satin. The day the world cheered, but he quietly broke. Music as a secret diary. Michael Jackson rarely said what he truly felt in interviews, but he did say it, just not in words. He said it in music. Every verse, every whisper, every scream. For Michael, the studio was more than a workplace. It was his confessional booth, his journal, his diary set to melody. Take Dirty Diana. On the surface, it's a gritty rock anthem about temptation, a femme fatale, a dangerous seductress. But listen closer. The name wasn't random. The choice wasn't accidental. And Michael admitted years later that Diana Ross herself was on his mind when he recorded it. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't cruelty. It was tension, a raw acknowledgement of the fire she lit inside him. Passion and frustration wrapped in distortion guitars and screams. Then, shift to remember the time. Smooth, sultry, golden. A song about a love so vivid it feels like yesterday. Michael described it as a memory of the first time you fell in love. Fans assumed it was about a nameless woman, but insiders, they whispered Diana's name again, because who else could have been that unforgettable first spark? And then, of course, she's out of my life. Listen to the cracking in his voice at the end of the song. That wasn't acting. That wasn't performance. That was pain. The sound of a man recording his heartbreak in real time. To us, these were hits. Chart toppers, songs we danced to, cried to, lived through. But to Michael, they were diary entries. Moments of truth disguised as pop. Messages smuggled into the open, hidden under melodies the world thought were universal. This is why his songs cut so deep, because they weren't written for millions. They were written for one. One woman, one muse, one secret he could never fully hold, so he poured it into sound. When you listen now. With Diana Ross in mind, his catalog transforms. It stops being just pop music. It becomes a secret diary the whole world heard, but only a few ever truly understood. His private confessions. On stage, Michael was untouchable. Dazzling glove. Moonwalk. Crowd screaming so loud the ground shook, but in private, the volume dropped, and so did the mask. Late at night, he'd pick up the phone, not to a reporter, not to a fan, but to a trusted friend. One of those friends was Glenda, a woman whose quiet conversations with Michael were secretly taped. And in those recordings, the King of Pop didn't sound like the King of Pop at all. He sounded like a boy still whispering into the dark. He spoke of Diana, always Diana. He admitted what the world had only guessed. It was one-sided, in my head. Just imagine that. The man adored by millions. The man who could have had anyone. Yet the only person he confessed to loving never loved him back the same way. In Neverland, his sanctuary, the story got even stranger. Tucked away in that sprawling fantasy world was a private room. Not for guests, not for family, a space only for him. And in it, a shrine. Photographs of Diana. Keepsakes. Memories he refused to let go. This wasn't obsession in the tabloid sense. It wasn't scandal. It was ache. The kind of ache that builds when love has nowhere to land. And yet, through all the pain, there was no bitterness in his voice. No anger, just longing. A gentle sadness that seemed to live in his chest, even as the world cheered his every step. He loved her openly in interviews. He loved her privately in whispers. He loved her so deeply, he carried it into his will, naming her as guardian to his children if his mother couldn't care for them. That wasn't a casual choice. That was trust. That was devotion. That was Michael's way of saying, even if I'm gone, I want Diana to be the one watching over what I love most. His confessions prove something few ever understood. For Michael, Diana wasn't a phase. She wasn't a crush. She wasn't a headline. She was the great unanswered question of his life. The love story that never became a love story. The secret he kept speaking, even when the world wasn't listening. The will that spoke louder than words. The world wakes up to shock. Michael Jackson, gone at just 50 years old. Fans weep. The streets flood with candlelight. The King of Pop story cut short. But inside the chaos of lawyers, estates, and news headlines, something unexpected surfaced. His will, a document written years earlier, and buried in its lines was a revelation that silenced everyone who read it. If his mother, Catherine, could not raise his children. Michael wanted Diana Ross to do it. Not his brothers, not his sisters, not close friends in the industry. Diana Ross. Think about that. Of all the people in his life, of all the connections he made, he chose her. The same woman who guided him when he was a boy. The same woman he confessed he loved. the same woman whose absence had once broken him. It wasn't a casual mention, it wasn't symbolic. This was his final act of trust, and it spoke louder than any interview, louder than any lyric, louder than the whispers that followed them for decades. Because naming someone in a will isn't about publicity. It isn't about performance. It's about who you believe will protect your legacy when you're gone. For Michael, Diana wasn't just a mentor. She wasn't just an idol. She wasn't just the love he could never claim. She was the one person he believed could guard what mattered most: his children, his blood, his future. The tabloids spun it as scandal. Fans debated endlessly, but the truth is simpler. It was Michael's last confession, written not in music this time, but in legal ink. Even in death, he was still speaking to her, still reaching for her, still binding his story to hers in the most permanent way possible. No cameras, no interviews, no stage lights, just a line in a will. That proved, in the end, Diana Ross was not just part of Michael Jackson's story. She was the story. Diana's late admission. The world is still in mourning. Crowds gather. Millions tune in to watch Michael Jackson's memorial. Songs, tributes. Tears. But one voice is missing: Diana Ross. She isn't there. Her absence is deafening, and the whispers start immediately. Why didn't she come? Wasn't she his closest friend? Wasn't she the love of his life? Days later, she finally speaks. Not in front of cameras, not with a performance, but with a statement. Quiet, almost trembling with weight. And in those words, Diana admits what many had suspected but never confirmed. She said Michael had always confided in her, that their bond was real, that she loved him deeply in her own way. It wasn't a press release. It wasn't PR damage control. It was raw. Honest human, she admitted she had chosen silence during the memorial because she couldn't bear it. She couldn't face the grief in front of millions. It was too personal, too painful. For decades, Michael had confessed his heart to the world. And Diana? She had remained enigmatic, careful, guarded. But now, with him gone, she finally cracked, finally let the truth escape. And here's the tragedy. It came too late. Michael would never hear those words, never feel that admission, never know that the woman who had been his mother, his sister, his idol, had also carried her own secret affection for him all along. Her late admission wasn't just about grief, it was the missing puzzle piece, the quiet proof that their story had always been more than rumor, more than obsession, more than unrequited love. It was complicated, messy, tender, and painfully real. In the end, Diana Ross didn't need to sing at his memorial. She didn't need to stand at the podium. Her silence, followed by those words, said it all. She loved him. She always had, and she would carry that love. In private, forever. The final truth. Strip away the headlines, the rumors, the speculation that fed tabloids for 40 years. What's left? A boy. Michael, 9 years old, looking up at Diana Ross like she was the only safe place in the world. And that look never left him. Not through fame, not through heartbreak, not even through the chaos that came later. He loved her, not as a passing crush, not as a publicity stunt, but as the central truth of his life. He said it openly in interviews. He whispered it privately in late-night phone calls. He carved it into his music, and in the end, he wrote it into his will. Diana Ross wasn't just his mentor. She wasn't just his idol. She wasn't even just his secret love. She was the axis around which his emotional world spun. And here's the haunting part. For all the fame, for all the power, for all the millions who screamed his name, the one thing Michael Jackson never had was the one thing he wanted most: her The final truth is not scandal, it's not obsession, it's not rumor, it's longing. Decades of longing, a love story without an ending. Michael never stopped speaking it, in his songs, in his confessions, even in death, through the legacy he left in her hands. And Diana, her silence spoke just as loudly, until, at last, she broke it, and admitted she loved him too. But only after he was gone. The world may never fully understand what they were. Friends, mentors, confidants, something more, something less. But the truth is simple. Michael Jackson's greatest love story was never with the women the tabloids chased. It wasn't with the wives he married. It wasn't even with the millions who adored him. It was always Diana, the first star he ever saw and the last name on his lips. If not spoken, then written into the legacy he left behind. The final truth, Michael Jackson's heart belonged to one woman, and her name was Diana Ross. So what do you think? Was it unrequited? Was it deeper than the world will ever know? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because we'll keep bringing you the stories that reveal the human hearts behind the Hollywood legends.